Hey, how you guys doing? Welcome back to another episode of Soulja Talk the podcast. I'm your host, Staff Sergeant McPherson, and on this show we discuss military topics with current and prior service members. Okay, today I have a special guest with me. I have Sergeant First Class Gaston.
Word, word.
How you doing, Sergeant?
I'm good. How are you?
Everything going all right today?
Of course.
Okay, Sarge, I want you to kind of go ahead and introduce yourself to the people.
Sergeant First Class Christopher Gadson. I am originally from Detroit, Michigan, but I'm the 44th Medical Brigade Equal Opportunity Advisor.
Okay, so you say you from where, Sarge?
Detroit, Michigan.
Okay, so growing up in Detroit, right? I want you to kind of like explain to the people like what was it like growing up and what was it like growing up in your neighborhood?
So I'm from the west side of Detroit, 7 Mile Evergreen to be exact. I was raised there, and then I moved over to Lasser, and well, they call it Lasher, but Lasser, and I stayed over there for a majority of my high school life. I was raised in low income housing until I was about 13, and then I lived with my dad, and where school became really an integral part of my life. So just growing up in the city of Detroit, getting into city of Detroit things, favorite foods, Coney Island, played a lot of basketball growing up as a kid, and just did a whole lot of just rambunctious stuff. You know, my mom and my dad kept me in church a lot, but when I wasn't at church, I was ripping and running in the streets and hanging out and having a good time on the city bus.
Okay, so during that time, like that was kind of growing up. So what about like, I know you say you played sports growing up. So what about high school? Anything? Did you keep playing sports? Like
in high school, for me, academics became pretty much the focal point of my life. Played a little basketball. As I got older, just education really took over. Education just was like super important. Going to college became like the major focus in my life. So sports kind of fell by the wayside. I wanted to play basketball in college. Grades weren't good initially. So I really never got the opportunity to do what I really wanted to do, which was to continue to play sports. So yeah, school just took over as the number one priority at the time.
okay, so with that being said, with you being interested in school, so did you go to college or anything like that?
So yes, initially I went to college. I went to the University of Detroit Mercy. My cousins played ball there. So I kind of went because they were there and it was still close to home. I got accepted there on a partial for academics, and I was going to try to like walk on to the basketball team, but my grades it was just that being away from home or not having family, your parents there initially to kind of lord over you. You kind of get that initial taste of like real freedom. So then it puts you in a position where you're responsible for everything. And at that time in my life, at 18, going on 19 years old, just not the most responsible young man in that particular circumstance. So yeah, I started out in college, didn't do so hot the first time around, and yeah.
Okay, so what I want to get into, Sergeant, so what eventually led you to the decision to join in the Army?
So I actually joined the Army when I was 17 years old. My father was sitting at the table. We had like all of these college offers on the table, like all of these acceptance letters. It was like 12 schools that I had gotten into. And my dad was like, well, we got to make some decisions because we don't have the money for you to go to college. So my dad was in the Army. My stepmom was in the Army. and I kind of was always interested in joining the Army. It was something that was interesting to me. It wasn't something that I just was like, "I'll join the Army," but my parents had always said that was an option for me. So once I realized I wasn't going to have like the financial backing to go to the schools that I wanted to go to, I just decided to join the Army. And my 11th grade year, I went to basic training, came home. My senior year, I didn't even get like a senior summer. My senior summer was me in AIT. So I didn't even get like the senior summer to like spend with my friends. I like was whisked off like the day after me graduating. So, and then I came back and I still had one offer left on the table, and I took it and just decided to go to college. But as far as like the active duty choice, it was like 2007. I just had a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff going on in my life at that time. Was trying to get into music and just doing a whole bunch of just other stuff that just wasn't gonna work out in the long term. So I ended up going active duty.
Okay, so what you said 2007.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what was your primary MOS?
My primary MOS, I'm a 68 Mike by trade. That is a nutrition care specialist in the Army. Probably, in my opinion, the greatest MOS in the Army, because we provide in the direction that the Army is going with H2F and all of these different holistic approaches to optimizing performance for soldiers. It's the best MOS that you can have.
Okay, so how long are you guys where and how long is you guys AIT?
So the first part of your AIT, you're going to go to Fort Lee because you have to learn how to cook the Army way and look to understand the formulas and the processes for how food is made from the Army standard. And then from there, you go to Fort Sam Houston, where you learn the nutrition side of things. You learn how to do all of the calculations for macro and micronutrients. You learn how to provide for patients on specific diets. You learn how to, optimize human performance from a nutrition perspective. So you go Fort Lee 8 weeks, Fort Sam 9 weeks, and then you become a 68 Mike.
Okay, so basic and AIT, right? So, what's your most memorable moment in basic and AIT, if you got one?
The most memorable moment I want to say was from basic training. I talked a lot, but I didn't understand how the Army worked yet, because I was only like, I'm still a kid. I'm a child. I'm 17. I don't know how enlisted officer works, because 9 times out of majority of the time I'm not paying attention. So we're in the breezeway, and the company commander walks in, and I don't call the room to attention, or I don't, call the company to attention. I just like look at him, and he looks at me, and he just walks right into the office. And then my drill sergeant came out, and she just like she made me do PT for a long time that day. It was quite an interesting turn of events, but I learned from it. I learned, to look at rank and understand what rank means in the Army.
Yeah, because they take that kind of serious, like.
Yeah, especially in basic training. Understanding rank structure and understanding like who officers are, what they represent to the Army organization and the enterprise is very important. And as a new soldier, especially like week 4 or 5, you should kind of know. And I just was a young 17-year-old ripping and running and not really paying attention to anything at that time.
Okay, so like far as your leadership, so the leaders you have, like, you got any leaders that kind of specifically like stand out at the front of your mind, like
Yeah.
that affected you in a positive way?
Yeah, actually I do. My first assignment was in Germany, Landstuhl Regional Medical Center. And because our MOS is so small, you constantly run back into people that you know. So my first supervisor was actually, majority of my supervisors came from Germany. I'll say that. And the two that I had the fondest memories of, they're both retired. Sergeant First Class Bowens, she was Sergeant First Class Green at the time, and then Sergeant First Class retired Lee. They were both my NCOs, and they took care of me. Like Sergeant Bowens is like my Army mom. Always kept me on the straight and narrow, kept me well taken care of. Sergeant Lee was like an older sister. She was always making sure that I understood the process of being in the Army and like what that could look like for the future. So those are the two leaders that I gravitated towards the most. And then when I was an instructor, they were both at Fort Sam during my time as an instructor, and they both retired from the Army as Sergeant First Classes, but those were the two most important people as far as being a 68 Mike in my career from their mentorship.
Okay, so while we speaking of leaders, can you kind of explain to the people what makes a great leader to you?
What makes a great leader to me is someone who has the ability to adapt their leadership style to what is needed at the moment. I think a lot of times leaders get stuck in one way of doing things, but you should really be, you should have an adaptive leadership style. You should know when to utilize firm but fair. You should know when to utilize a softer approach. You should, understand how the regulations dictate what needs to be done at those particular moments. So I think for me, if I'm answering the question correctly, I would say leaders should just be hyper adaptive to whatever is needed from them to get to optimize their soldiers.
Okay. So there you guys go. You guys kind of got to know Sergeant First Class Gadson. So make sure you guys follow the podcast on Instagram at Soldiers Talk the Podcast. Also, you can find the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Sergeant, do you got any like closing remarks or anything? As far as like anything you want the soldiers to know?
At the end of the day, we are all people, and we should definitely treat each other with dignity and respect, and ensure that we're fostering a climate that allows people to be the best versions of themselves every day. And that's all I got, man.
Okay. Appreciate that, Sarge.
Yep.
So this has been another episode of Soldiers Talk the Podcast, and I'll see you guys in formation.